Hello my sweets. It is very windy outside. My room is very much a mess. My face is very bare and it has been a very long time since I've done this thing. If you have taken a look at my channel in the last couple weeks, you might have noticed that a lot of it is gone. Not really gone, I just unlisted most of my videos just to have sort of like a clean slate almost, and now there's like maybe a dozen videos left on there that I'm happy with being publicly available. They're all in playlists and stuff, you can still find them. I also made a new banner and profile picture, and I've decided that obviously I need to try something different. One of the first things I did on this channel was talk about books, and books are something that I'm hugely passionate about. I used to do book reviews on my channel. There are a lot of older videos on my channel where I did book reviews, and I've realized that they're not very articulated. They're mainly just me going, it's a great book, you should read it. That's not a great book review, is it? Today's book review is gonna be for Neil Gaiman's Ocean at the End of the Lane. I listened to the audiobook, however I do have a copy of it on my Kindle and have had that for years. I think I got it in 2015.
The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I've got two other books by Neil Gaiman to finish. Unnatural Creatures and American Gods, which I haven't read yet, but I still bought this because he's just awesome.
And I tried reading it like twice or even 3 times on the Kindle and kept hesitating and like sort of just closing it again and moving on to something else, because firstly, not a big fan of reading on the Kindle. I don't know why, it just doesn't feel like I'm reading something. I like having the pages in hand and being able to see how far I am in the book. And secondly, because, well, I didn't really know much about the book.
There's something that happened 40 years before, and now this guy, we don't know his name, and he gets into the town, goes back home basically, and gets caught up in these 40-year-old events. That's literally all I know. Wikipedia didn't even tell me what genre it is. I have no idea. I don't know if this is scary. I don't know if I should read this in the evening or rather wait till morning, because I'm a person for nightmares, really.
All I knew was that Neil was very, very proud of it, and what I gathered from the cover, which, I mean, look at the cover, it's creepy. It's beautiful and hauntingly beautiful, but it's also creepy as all hell, because especially the title, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, to me, hang on, I have to research this. I was convinced that there was like a horror movie called The House by the Lake. Apparently there isn't. Apparently there's just a song called that in German. However, I was absolutely convinced that there was some kind of horror movie that had a title somewhat reminiscent of The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and that creeped me out. And then there's the cover. On the cover, there's a person floating in the water, and it looks like they're drowning. And the fact that it's called The Ocean at the End of the Lane kind of suggests that someone's drowned. You know, it's like, yes, we've already mentioned an ocean here. There's someone in the water. They're drowning. That's what my brain did. And recently, I had the privilege of getting my hands on the audiobook through a friend of mine. So obviously the audiobook is narrated by the man himself. Oh my god, that adds so much to the story. Firstly, since he wrote it, obviously he knows what inflection and what tonality and what intonation every single sentence should be. And secondly, there's moments where there's poems from Alice in Wonderland being inserted into it, and there's a moment where a song is being inserted into the story and Neil Gaiman just starts singing that song. It was very, very adorable and beautiful, and I enjoyed it very much. Now on to the actual story. I'm gonna do my best to try and be spoiler free. If not, I will put a mute thingy over my face so that you'll know when not to listen. The Ocean at the End of the Lane starts out with an old man in his 40s, 50s, narrating, and he's just come from a funeral where he was with his family, and he is back to visit his family's home from when he was a child, except it's not there anymore because it's been demolished and new houses have been built. So instead, he drives all the way down to the end of the lane to get to Hempstock Farm, where he spent an interesting time as a child. He sits down in the backyard and starts remembering his childhood and his time at Hempstock Farm. Now, firstly, I would like to mention that Hempstock isn't a new name when it comes to Neil Gaiman's storytelling. We know the Hempstocks from Stardust, and thanks to a friend of mine, I now know that in the Graveyard book there are also Hempstocks. What's more is that at one point there is a little bit of an Easter egg slash reference to Neverwhere, when one of the characters says that it isn't easy being a door. It's very unexpected how this book turned out. I honestly thought that, and I mean this in the kindest way, because I love Neil Gaiman and I love Neil Gaiman's writing, and I could never say anything mean about him, honestly. But when I started reading The Ocean at the End of the Lane on my Kindle back then, I thought, oh no, I can't read this. I'm gonna end up hating it. I'm gonna find it boring. I can't read it. If I do, it'll spoil my love for Neil Gaiman's writing. Because it starts off like a very normal, tread-of-the-mill story. But then again, so does Neverwhere, and so does Stardust. Neither of those books start off hinting that there's gonna be magic and there's gonna be supernatural things, and in that way I feel like Neil Gaiman is a master storyteller, putting these marvelous things into a world that could very well be our own world. I mean, look at Neverwhere. We've got a whole world underneath London, a whole magical, complicated world that nobody knows about, and I feel like that is a very common trend with Neil Gaiman's writing, that whole magical realism of adding just a little layer of shine to our world, and I love that about his writing. I also said to my friend Steven, who has been coincidentally reading this book at the same time as me, he just finished a day earlier, I feel like Neil Gaiman tends to write the kind of characters that make you want to be a better person. Not necessarily through being a role model, and not necessarily through being the kind of person you'd never want to be. It's just the way he tells his stories make you want to strive to be better. I don't know if that's just a me thing or how that works. I just feel very strongly about it, and very much like that, The Ocean at the End of the Lane starts out very mundane, with this character remembering the time when he was 7 years old, living in that house with his parents and meeting Letty Hempstock on Hempstock Farm, and wonder happening in his life. The whole story is told from the perspective of a 7-year-old. It's hard to say. You know how Harry Potter is told from, it's a story about an 11-year-old boy, at least the first book is, but it's very different from the kind of writing Neil Gaiman does, and it's very different from the kind of writing a lot of people do. Around this time last year, I read Emma Donohue's Room, which is completely narrated by a 5-year-old boy, and I had a similar experience where the whole narration was very natural and very much felt like a child telling the story. And in that way, I absolutely loved The Ocean at the End of the Lane, because the whole thing felt like something a 7-year-old would tell you, including things like saying big words and pointing out how he didn't know what they meant, but he knew those words, or starting a paragraph, pointing something out, and then getting distracted and never going back to it again. And you can just tell that it's not Neil Gaiman who forgot to resolve this thing. It's this child, this 7-year-old child that just got distracted and then it wasn't important anymore, And I love that because, well, firstly, I have ADHD, I can very much relate to that, but it's absolutely magical when grown-ups write children and do it so well. If you know me at all, you know that my absolute favorite book of all time is The Little Prince, and one of the big quotes in that is that all grown-ups used to be children, children, but only few of them remember. And that is the reason why Neil Gaiman is one of my absolute favorite authors, because he's one of those grown-ups who remember being a child. And Neil Gaiman actually has this very famous quote. Someone told him that they wanted to be an author when they grew up and asked him if they were crazy, and he said, yes, you do not want to do that. Never grow up, just be an author. I think that's part of my sympathy for him and my admiration for him, that Neil Gaiman is just a very wise person in the way only a child could be wise. And I absolutely love that about Neil Gaiman. And The Ocean at the End of the Lane just confirmed that for me once more. The wonder and magic and horror of that story was told in a way only a child could tell it. There were moments where I was listening to it and was like, okay, I'm mildly creeped out. I'm gonna pause it here and come back tomorrow. But still, I would not shy away from reading this to a child because, you know, firstly, the story is told by a 7-year-old, you know? Children can take a lot more than we give them credit for, I think. And the same way that we underestimate children, I tend to underestimate myself when it comes to my resilience to creepy stories. So I powered through and I listened and I kept listening, and a lot of the time there were moments where the narrator would talk about things like children's fears, and if you know me, you know that the children's fears are my fears. The Ocean at the End of the Lane, to me, was a book that gave me an opportunity to explore the way I get scared of things and face certain fears of mine in a way that I think only children can. There's a kind of bravery that adults just aren't capable of anymore. I think if an adult writes a story with a child protagonist who knows how to have that kind of bravery and how to have the kind of wisdom a child has, shows such an understanding of the world that a lot of people just don't have. I don't know if this is a good review, if I've done a better job than I have in the past at doing reviews, or if it was just me gushing once more. All I know is that when I finished the book, I was absolutely overwhelmed with feelings and thoughts and this feeling of not quite knowing how to put them into words, and I think I'm still in that a lot. I have trouble phrasing the thoughts and feelings that I have about this book and that I have about Neil Gaiman's writing, and I'm trying my best, believe me, but it is hard. I do hope that I managed okay though. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video. I do not know when I'll be uploading again, but when I do, it'll be because I'll have finished a different book and want to talk about it. Tell me your thoughts. Okay, cool. Bye.